Hello and welcome back to the Eagle Forum YouTube channel. I'm Colleen Holcomb and I'm joined by Schlafly, Cori. We're here today to discuss episode 7 of Mrs. America. This episode is entitled Bella and it largely focuses on Bella Abzug. But we still see quite a bit of Phyllis. In fact, the show opens with Phyllis being at a meeting, kind of struggling a little bit, and then she gets hit in the face with a pie. Can you talk a little bit about that incident? How much of that is accurate, Anne?
Well, my mother was hit in the face with a pie by a yipper named Aaron Kay, who at the meeting of the National Women's Republican Club, and that picture of her being hit in the face with a pie was splashed across newspapers, front page of newspapers across the country when it happened. It was very startling, and it was violence.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important to remember today just how violent the late 60s and 70s were, that people thought it was okay to bomb people or to go after people and to attack people. And so it actually at the time seemed kind of minor in terms of the violence angle of it, but we look at it and we say, what do you mean violently hitting her with a pie? And yes, that's what happened. The pie she was hit with was apple.
I thought that was inaccurate. I thought I remembered it was apple. And because it was cloaked in humor and I think it was intended to be presented as more of a practical joke, but isn't it the case that she injured her eye and had some pretty serious, had a long recovery time?
Well, I don't remember her wearing an eye patch at any time, but she could very well have scratched her eye on it. I mean, because you see, they showed in the movie a cream pie, but it was actually a double crusted apple pie. So the crust ended up hitting her eye, which made it a little bit sharper. Cream pies don't cause such damage.
Right, that's right. And I understand she was given the opportunity to press criminal charges, but declined to do that.
Well, I mean, my mother always had good humor, and I think she realized that this was something she could pivot and use to her advantage, and that would make more sense for her to wear it as a badge of honor.
Ever the strategist, that's right. Well, this episode really depicts Phyllis as struggling personally. It's intimated that she might be going through menopause. She seems depressed, and I can't imagine. I know menopause is a serious issue and can be very difficult for a lot of women, but I don't see Phyllis going around depressed. Was any of that accurate?
No, I don't see that at all. I mean, obviously they make a big deal about her relationship with her eldest daughter and that there's contention there. In reality, my sister changed her name before going to college, and this was something that everybody in the family thought was a good idea. And my mother said, she doesn't have to fight my battles. And so we spent many dinner table conversations with lists of names as we all discussed what would be a good name to rename yourself. It was kind of fun. And ultimately, my sister decided on the name Liza, and that's what she went to college as. She never was Phyllis Jr. at college.
Yeah. Well, I think it's amazing. I remember Elaine Donnelly told a story about Phyllis getting into a car where Phyllis was, and there being a little bucket on the floor. And Elaine said, "What's that?" And Phyllis said, "Oh, I'm not feeling very well. That's just in case I get sick." And then she just went on to discuss whatever business she was dealing with. So this notion of Phyllis being sick and feeling sorry for herself, we had several events in DC where Phyllis actually was very physically sick, but you never would have known. She went on and did what she needed to do. So it's just...
Well, she was a trooper, and she was always going to put her best face forward.
Yeah, it's really hard to imagine Phyllis ever being self-pitying in any way. There's also a scene, you mentioned the intimation about your sister changing her name. There was also a suggestion that your Aunt Eleanor knew before Phyllis did. And again, they bring in that relationship with your Aunt Eleanor to make...
What a sad sack they make her out to be. And they make up this scene that Phyllis is so condescending and rude to her sister-in-law. And, you know, it could have been pretty easy for them to check the facts, but since they make this idea that Phyllis wouldn't invite Eleanor to Thanksgiving, the world should know that Eleanor Schlafly hosted the extended family Thanksgiving party for 50 years, which Eleanor herself hosted, which featured between 50 and 80 people every year. And we always went to Eleanor's party, and there was never an idea that we would not go to Eleanor's party. And no, Thanksgiving was something that Phyllis Schlafly herself never actually did.
Wow. Well, it's really remarkable, and I think extremely sexist, the way the series presents Phyllis as being, as you mentioned, so excluding of this single woman who's characterized very badly. All of the women are struggling, they're all fighting, they're all backbiting, they're all betraying each other. Nobody seems to be true to their principles. It is not.
Well, maybe that's because they know that the feminists had a lot of infighting. They didn't think it was fair unless they show the other side with a lot of infighting.
And there was a lot of infighting surrounding the International Women's Year, and that's largely the context in which they focus on Bella Abzug. What do you remember about the International Women's Year?
Well, it was a big event, and there was a lot of activity leading up to it. And my mother was very involved in trying to get women to participate in it. But early on, she and Lottie Beth Hobbs decided to put on this alternative event. And so then my mother really devoted her energies and strategy to bringing 20,000 women to Houston on her own. Now, the International Women's Conference, I think, had a couple of thousand women that they brought down there. My mother brought 20,000 women to Houston to be the counter rally. And so this notion that Phyllis Schlafly got cold feet and was a no-show to some Illinois, the Illinois convention, well, it's ridiculous because she never was going to be a delegate. She was doing her own event.
And they present this competition among the women where Phyllis's supporters are delegates and Phyllis isn't a delegate, and there's this idea that Phyllis is jealous, which is crazy.
Well, but the point is that Phyllis encouraged each one of her ladies to be a delegate. She wanted as much of a presence at their conference, in addition to having her own conference, which with 20,000 ladies came to her conference.
Absolutely. I know Phyllis has always encouraged people to fulfill their callings and to be as effective as they can in the area where they were called. But right, I understand Phyllis wanted a strong representation. And I think she would not at all be upset about not being a delegate herself. And it sounds like her resources were much better spent getting people to the Astrodome.
Well, I don't think it was ever an idea that she would be a delegate.
Right.
I mean, one of the things that my mother always did very well, and it's worth for all of us to remember, is she understood the power of delegating. And because delegating duplicates yourself. And so her goal with the Eagles who supported her was to delegate to them these various jobs so that she wouldn't have to do them.
Right. She absolutely. She not only delegated, but she really empowered and was so happy to promote other people who were willing to take on big areas. In fact, she would be the first to encourage people to do things that they never thought that they could do. And Phyllis never cared who got the credit. What do you think about the presentation of the relationship as kind of a frenemy relationship between Phyllis and Lottie Beth? It's like it's this begrudging alliance. Is that accurate?
Well, everything I ever knew about their relationship was extremely cordial, and they worked well together. And my mother was grateful for the women that Lottie Beth brought into the movement, that Lottie Beth's connections with various Church of Christ churches was able to bring so many more women into the movement, and they worked well together. Lottie Beth ended up resigning from Eagle Forum, I think about 1980, because Lottie Beth wanted to focus much more on her religious calling than the political calling.
And I know Phyllis was extremely supportive of that as well. How do you feel about the way Rosemary Thompson is portrayed throughout the series?
So, they made up a bunch of fictional characters to drive their story, but then they took a couple of real life people and twisted their actual history. These producers couldn't be bothered to learn what the truth was about these women, whether it was Eleanor Schlafly, Lottie Beth Hobbs, or Rosemary Thompson. So the widower of Rosemary Thompson, Jim, called me the other day so upset about the portrayal of his late wife in this. So I have here, these are the two books that Rosemary Thompson wrote in 78 and then 81 about feminism and about the family. Rosemary Thompson was very smart, very dedicated, and really a go-getter. In this movie, she's presented as a buffoon. So when the Reagan administration was formed, Rosemary Thompson had a high job in the Department of Education under Bill Bennett, and which she worked at for many years. And so the idea that she was some kind of, they almost make her seem as kind of a dumb, crazy a character. It was just a lie. It's not historical, and it's a shame. Rosemary Thompson is not here to defend herself because she passed away about 10 years ago. But it's a shame that they can't even get the real people right in their characterizations. And it's not as though the literature isn't available. You can read all about Rosemary Thompson.
Yeah. Well, I'm really interested to see how they're going to present International Women's Year. I think that's going to be covered in the next episode. But I have to ask you, Anne, did your Aunt Eleanor inspire you? You're a very well-respected chef. Did her Thanksgiving dinners have an impact on you and your career choice?
Well, actually, my Aunt Eleanor was not a cook. She did not cook the Thanksgiving dinner. She was not a domestic. That was not her interest. Yeah. My Aunt Eleanor was a social butterfly, and she had a wide social friend circle. She was extremely active, and there's nothing she liked better than a good party, and she loved to host parties. She loved to go to parties, and so in that way, I guess some of her socialite activities did come down to me, because I admit I always love a good party.
Well, we're so thankful to have your insights into what we're seeing, and we're seeing that so much of it really is pure fiction, and that the true story is so much more inspiring and so much more interesting. So thank you again for being with us.